Well, good morning. Um, I have to first of all apologise that this Sunday Natter is going out a little bit later than scheduled that we
What?
normally do because I've been cruising around the English Channel in the Bay of Biscay having a lovely time. So I do apologise, but better late than never. That's what I say. And you might also notice that we're just going solo this week. And again, that was because of my scheduling. So I do apologise for that. But hopefully you'll enjoy this episode just as much as all of the other ones. Next week we have got Wendy Gardner, who was brilliant at the Sew and Bee when it first started. She used to write the books, the original books that came out. She was part and parcel of that. And also anyone going to the shows would see Wendy. And then we've got a couple of surprise. Well, we've got definitely one surprise on the last show, but talk about that later. So how are you, Mr. Macdonald? Have you missed me?
Missed? Well, of course I've missed you. Yes, your little anecdotes and quick-witted stop you in your tracks. I'm moving on to yes. And
Because I've not had my phone on for
no, I know I
haven't
had a shut your mouth in a while, so I'm sure that might pop out sooner rather than later.
It may, but I was sewing when I was on my cruise, I have to say. I managed to get some bits and pieces done for the holiday that I'm teaching at in November with Stitchtopia. So I was doing a little bit of work. So there you are. Anyway, let's talk about the quarterfinals. So there was 5 people in quarterfinals week. Whilst I watched it in a bit of a hurry, it wasn't necessarily my favourite episode. I've seen better.
I wholeheartedly agree. I wasn't looking forward to Children's Week, but I actually quite enjoyed that one.
I did, yeah, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and there's a few other ones that I really haven't, but this, I think they were trying to, in my opinion, I think they were trying to tie the knots so tightly to make it firm and complete, and I'm not sure this show actually made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And I had it written down at the beginning who was going to be going out, which is not good. Anyway, let's talk about the first challenge, which was 5 hours. It was a really challenging first pattern challenge, I thought, and it was the jacket inspired by the Alfred Hitchcock film The Birds, which is one of the most frightening films. If you've ever watched it, you'll realise. I think you have to be of a certain age, but I think it still would be frightening now. Anyway, it was to represent early 60s elegance. And Edith Head was the designer who created that jacket. It was softly tailored. The fabric was crucial to this particular garment. It had grown on sleeves, which I'm going to ask you a few questions about the technical side, Alistair. The gusset under the arm. The judges wanted it to be pressed well, so it had a clean finish. There was actually 17 pattern pieces, which is a lot of pattern pieces, and it had pockets and darts. So, what did you think of the actual pattern challenge? 5 hours? I'm always, this is the biggest thing with me. 5 hours. It would take me, I don't know how long, to cut out those 17 pattern pieces. So when Kaz, bless her, made a Henry's of the gusset, because she cut the gusset out of her main piece, the fact that she got herself back on track, I thought was amazing. But anyway, what did you think about the actual challenge, Alistair?
So I think these are garments that sort of mystify people. It's these type of patterns sometimes can actually use quite a lot of fabric, and not necessarily in a good way, because you end up consuming. It's a bit like bias cutting. So this type of jacket, where you could almost cut the whole thing in a round in one if your fabric was big enough. But they sort of defy, when you look at them, they sort of defy belief, because you can't see any seams. And there's very few seams to observe. There's a little where the stand collar goes. You've got the little darts that create the shape, but they're hidden under the collar. It's a very, very flattering look. There's big brands like Shearing Guild and Oscar that are sold in places like Liberty. They do a lot of that kind of thing. It's very Japanese-esque. So in terms of the form of the pattern cutting, the pattern cutting itself is quite simplistic, in the sense that because there aren't very many seams and it's used most of the fact, and it's quite a it's not a that garment is not a fitted garment, so it's supposed to be relaxed. So you've got a bit of maneuver in there in terms of like the fit, because it's supposed to be boxy. It's not supposed to be a tight fitting garment. If you've never done anything like that before, then yes, I completely and utterly understand that it would look like a bit strange. However, there are lots of other patterns in that sort of like family, like bat wing sleeves. That's probably a back and a front cut out. So kimono blocks, you've got in the trouser family, you've got like the fisherman's sort of like tie Winnie's sort of trouser, made famous by MC Hammer in the 1990s. So there's lots of things like that that are all consuming and all rolled into sort of one. So it was interesting though. The only thing that looked normal that quite a few of them actually got wrong was the under collar and the top collar.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because when I was going through the list, more of them had that the wrong way than, they had the undercollar on the top and the etc. Top tip would be possibly to mark your pieces, and make sure that you knew which was the top and the bottom. Obviously, they're time constraints. I felt that Kit might have done something along these lines, because he was actually helping quite a bit, or certainly in the editing he was helping when Kaz was confused about the sleeves, how you put the lining and the outer part of the sleeves together. Your head doesn't think that it's going to work, but it actually does work. So I did feel that possibly Kit had a slight advantage on this, because he could either foresee it or he had actually practiced it, whereas others really got confused. But the collar, have you got a tip where you would make sure? And again, it's all down to time. You would try it, wouldn't you?
Well, you would make the collar separate to the jacket, and then you would attach the collar onto the jacket. There's a big indication, for instance, the under collar is always slightly smaller. So the top collar is slightly larger, because you want the seam to just roll underneath, just to keep away and just to hide itself away. So if for instance, unlike some shirts, when you fold it over, the nature of, because you're not making it out of wool, if for instance you fold over cotton, the excess fabric usually just sits underneath and you don't see it. Whereas with something like wool or what have you, you always have to cut an undercollar smaller, because when you roll it over, any excess will just push the bulk and it'll make the collar not sit properly, and it won't give that its nice roll over the top. So it's very important. No, we're not talking about an undercollar isn't cut, significantly smaller. It's not, you're not trying to fit this massive outer collar onto this teeny weeny thing. We're talking about, a few millimeters, maybe half, 5 mil along the whole seam, which isn't actually, when you're putting it in, isn't a huge amount. Once you
be really careful on your seam allowance as well, to make sure that your seam allowance is consistent. Otherwise, that could beggar it up, couldn't it?
Yeah, so you would always make the collar and stand. So for instance, some people like to attach the stand part to the actual garment and then attach the collar onto
So for people who don't know what a stand part is, Alistair, which part of this?
So if ever you go into a charity shop, or just look in your wardrobe, get out a jacket and you'll see it's almost like a yoke. So it's like a little half moon piece that comes up and over, and it's where the collar is not the whole thing. So you have a little stand that the collar then sits on top of. So that's like a little mandarin collar, if you like, underneath the actual collar that's on the top. When you're doing things like a Peter Pan collar, which is flat, and it's just, you know, that sort of like horseshoe type of shape, that doesn't have a stand because it's to lie completely flat. But because that has nature, sorry, clue in its name, it's standing up. Your neck, when your shoulders meet your neck, it goes up. So you need to have a stand for then the collar to come out of. Whereas when you've got a Peter Pan, it follows the natural neckline of your collarbone.
Thank you, because it's so good. I think it's worth it when we're doing these things. If people don't understand all that terminology, it's like if you go into a different land, like computer speak. Sometimes you think, oh, I have no idea what it is. So thanks for explaining that. The other thing that was really important, I thought, was the weight of the fabric. Obviously, they were using wool. Ola had picked a really good fabric, so it looked really nice. I mean, she got a few things wrong. Don't get me wrong. Gaynor, I don't know if her fabric would have looked better had she been given that little bit of extra time to do the pressing, or whether it was just too heavy. There's obviously different weights of wool fabric, Alistair. You sell quite a lot of it on the House of Alistair website, which you still get 15% discount. You've got your Savile, even just your Savile Row swatches, you have different weights for the summer and the winter, don't you?
Yeah, so what's a lot of people think, everyone thinks wool cold, it's winter. In actual fact, before the introduction of linen and cottons, the vast majority of all of our clothes, even the underpinning, was made from 100% wool. Wool does have two seasons. It has a spring-summer season, which the wools are a lot. You would not believe how fine they can make wools. And this isn't something new. This is something that's been around for yonky years, if that's even a phrase, which it isn't. So don't.
It is now.
But it is now. It's in my head anyway. So yeah, so there is lots of different ways. You've got, with a jacket like that, you need a fabric that is going to maintain the structure to be away from the body, but you don't want it too light to fall into itself, because then it doesn't show the beautiful pattern off. For instance, you asked me about a grow-on sleeve.
Yes.
There's a little bit of a clue in the name as well. So it seamlessly merges into one, so there's no seam, and a way around creating that 3D shape. Because if you imagine, like, this is the best way to describe it. When they were doing Korea Week and they were doing that very flat garment that was like kimono-esque, that was very, very flat. There was no gusset inside the actual arm. Now, a lot of kimonos, they have an open gusset underneath the arm, which allows the fabric to flow, so it's not restricted. So you've got that type of garment. The reason why they put the little gusset in there was to give a 3D element shape underneath the arm, but also to allow movement within the garment. Now, obviously, it top stitched his, which is a big no-no, as Patrick pointed out.
Yeah, yes, and because he top stitched it, I thought that was quite a heinous offence. And whilst he won, I think he should have had serious marks taken off him for not following the pattern and top stitching it, because from a wearable point of view, you're not going to get that movement. The whole purpose of the gusset is to give you that movement underneath there. So
it's to avoid the restriction of movement. And the other thing with that, now, for instance, on a lot of Savile Row tailoring, we use a thing called like a saddle stitch. But it looks like on a collar, because wool is so bulky, and if wool gets moisture or heat onto it, wool has a memory and it has a life of its own. It will behave and do what you want, but then as soon as it gets a little bit of heat or moisture, it then can turn into a completely different thing. That's when suits get valeted, gents will send their Savile Row suits back to the tailor because they are sponge washed. They're not dry cleaned. They're sponge washed, and then they go through the resetting pressing process to make sure the suits are absolutely pristine. And so you don't normally do that. There is the saddle stitch, which will leave teeny weeny little dimples. If he was going to do that to keep the wool as flat as possible, that stitch doesn't interfere with the bias because it's such a stitch. Whereas when you top stitch, that's a row of stitches There's
Yeah.
no giving that
No
whatsoever.
flexibility in that at all. So yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously it was between Ola's. Ola had basically, she had good fabric. Her collar was the wrong way, and the gusset was okay. Whereas Kit, his collar was okay, the gusset was good, but it was top stitched. But he'd well pressed it.
Yeah, again,
one.
yeah, again, it just shows you, for instance, it depends on your fabric base. If you've chosen a wise fabric, whenever you've got a pattern, you always need to do a little bit of experimentation in terms of fabrics have different drapes, they have different properties and specialities, shall we say. So it's very important. Also, the other things you've got to remember as well, if you're lining something, you've got to choose the appropriate lining, because that can repel against what you've put on the outer. That's why traditionally in a lot of couture and also bespoke things, for instance, when we do a coat, we never attach the lining permanently around the hem, because you want the swing of the hem to be unpinged. So we use it's almost like a laddering stitch. So it's a bit like a safety stitch, so a bar tack stitch. And
so you got the movement.
Yeah, we create this loop, and that creates like a string, if you like, that attaches the lining. So we do a kick, which is a section of lining that goes all the way around the hem. The lining inside comes down, which is hemmed separately, and then we attach it only in a few points to where it is. And that means that whenever you're sitting down or when you're moving, the lining moves independently from the outer.
Now, what did fill my heart with joy, and I presume in the pattern instructions, was the use of seam tape, because everybody had put the seam tape on the gusset. And after that, I nearly fell off the chair when I saw it, because more often than not, people aren't using that. But the use of the seam tape would allow, particularly with that gusset, you couldn't use any of the other tapes because of the need to move. So the seam tape gives you that stability for putting it in. It's a must, absolute must. But I wouldn't have just put the seam tape on the gusset piece and I couldn't see the other side. You would put it on both sides, put it on the inside of where you're inserting the gusset, and that's underneath sleeve part, and put it on the gusset piece. They definitely all had it on their gusset piece. And the reason for that, then it's going to give you those two edges to really be able to stabilize it enough to get that gusset in and give you a really good finish. So I was like, yes, must have been in the instructions.
Well, my it would have been, because they all used it. Nobody used it out. My biggest tip with putting in gussets, essentially a gusset is a triangle. It doesn't always have to be, and it doesn't always have to be a triangular shape. But let's, for the point of today's discussion, let's just say it's a triangle. I always do opposing. So where the triangle's like that, I will do this side first, and then I go the opposite side and I stitch that one. Then I revert to the other two, stitch that one down, and then stitch that one. I do not stitch from there and then back down there and then go down there. What you want to do is you want to set it and sit it either side first, and then match it on the opposite side. If you do it like that, you will get even distribution, and you won't get, when you come to those points, you're able to fold over and you're able to see where the two stitch lines at the other side are to match them up. There was, I can't remember who it was, but somebody had a little hole in their gusset. I think it was
no, I did write that. Cars had a hole in their gusset.
Yeah, so that would have been, yes. There's nothing wrong with a hole in your gusset. That's for sure. We don't like holes in our gusset, but that would have been an easy fix. However,
she was up against it because she was catching up all of the time in fairness to her.
Yeah, but hats off to them, because when you're given a pattern blind, it's not, you haven't created the pattern, so you don't know where all the idiosyncrasies and pitfalls are. So when you're just handed a pattern and you're just told to get going, you don't have time to make a prototype. You have to go straight into the real fabric. So in these challenges, hats off to them, because when you're given a pattern blind and you've never sewn that particular pattern before, And also it depends on who's written the actual pattern.
Exactly.
That way of putting the lining in is not a normal, it's not something that commercial patterns tell you to do, because it's really difficult to explain.
And Kaz did actually say at the very beginning she's a visual and not a reader. And a lot of people are visual and not readers. One thing I would say to people is when they pick their patterns up, this one definitely must have said, put the seam tape on the gusset. I bang on about this all the time. If there's any interlining to be done or any seam tapes of any description, do that first. Get that piece cut out, get it on, get it pressed. Use your pressing cloth. The tapes are available on the House of Alistair. I think you've still got pressing cloths as well, haven't you? Which I see through. Get one of those. Get them on. Leave them for 20 to 30 minutes, because whilst you're doing that, you've cut it out. You've done that. Then you've got lots of other jobs to do. And sometimes the criticism with the patterns is that they don't necessarily put them in the order that you need to, because technically what should have happened is as soon as they put their seam tapes on, they should have down tools on that bit for 30 minutes. What they would have done is they'll have put it on and then tried to put it straight in. I'm almost sure, because of the way the pattern was written, but just a little tip there.
But also Kaz gave herself a little bit of a rod just because she used a checked fabric. So she also had to make sure that that was, by all sense of purposes, pattern matched. So
and she didn't like the actual use of the fabric, in so much as she made a comment of how wasteful it was, which you've already pointed out, and that didn't sit well with her. So I'm sure she wouldn't pick a pattern naturally like that, because it is extremely wasteful of the fabric. But you could also make some little bags and things to go with it. Little lavender sachets. Don't lose any of your bits.
No, there's loads of things that you can do. I mean, for instance, when you bias cut dresses, that's extremely wasteful of fabric. The results, though, can be stupendous. Yeah. Although just a little air of caution, when you're making something, if you're then gifting it to somebody else who needs it altered, be very wary when you unpick bias seams, especially in silk or even a polyester silk equivalent, because trying to put that back to where you've unpicked it, it's almost nigh and impossible. With bias cutting, if you get it wrong, you pretty much, to get a really neat and perfect finish, you really should cut it from scratch.
Yeah. So going back to this first challenge, Gaynor was 5th. It wasn't finished, although our pocket was good, the gusset was good. She needed extra time to press. Kaz was 4th. They really complimented her on the fact that she'd made up the time. She just needed to tidy things up, and it wasn't as pressed as it could be. And of course, she had the little hole, but although the collar was good. 3rd was Yasmin, who we haven't really talked about. Hers was that lovely purple fabric. The collar was the wrong way around, so it was the up and down again. And she had a raw edge on her gusset when Esme got in close, and it wasn't pressed as well. 2nd, that's my husband sneezing in the background. 2nd was Ola, and hers was that lovely grey fabric. She'd chosen well, I thought, with that fabric. Although her collar was the wrong way around again, the gusset was great. And then Kit won. His was the brown. It was a good weight fabric. He knew what he was looking at. And actually, when they were choosing the fabric, he made the comment about, oh, that one's not good. And he put it back. Collar was okay. Gusset was good, except he top stitched it, which we've talked about. I think it was probably hard to put them in order, if the truth be told.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of them got the collar spectacularly, or 3 of them got the collar spectacularly wrong.
Two got the collar. Did 2 get the collar wrong? Kaz did okay with the collar.
It was okay.
It was yeah. So sorry, 3. Yeah.
So that is a pretty major thing. It can happen, and the thing is, if you don't check it, once it's in, under those time constraints. Also, let's not forget as well, they had to put facings in. And they had to attach the facings to the lining, and they were also having to fully line it in as
5 hours.
Yeah, it's in 5 hours. That is to get even just the easiest bit is once you've got the lining attached to the facing, to sew it all the way in the round. That's the easiest bit. Getting that lining, especially when you're using a really lightweight fabric that's going into a much thicker fabric. One wants to do everything and anything in cartwheels, and the other one just wants to sit there and have a donut.
Yeah, so, exactly.
It's they're very, very, very different beasts.
Yes, I think it was a hard one. We're going to move on to our favourite part of the show, which was the transformation. Tongue in cheek. The only good thing was, and I did do a yay, they all had exactly the same red velvet curtains with the tie back. So they had one set of curtains and they had one tie back, and they had to make they were cinema curtains, so they would have been heavy. They had to make an outfit for an awards after party, and it had to be glamorous, high glamour. They had lots of fabric to use, obviously. They wanted to see the pleating, and they wanted the cord and the tassels to be incorporated into the garment. Now, the first person I'm going to ask you about, and I've never seen this happen before, was Ola, who, bless her, had a bit of a breakdown, remembering the time strain again, but she was allowed to go and start again. I've never seen that happen before. She got another pair of curtains. Did you notice that?
I actually didn't pick up on that at all. And no, I know that when I was watching it, maybe I was being distracted by my 16-year-old. Let's blame him.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't actually see that. I didn't actually register that. But no, I've never seen that before. All I know is well, not only her but Kaz, they kept snipping too high, and everything kept on getting shorter and shorter. Then Kaz then started to put good days in, you know, and welcome anyone that's listening from Australia. So good day. But yeah, it was a bit sort of velvet's because velvet has a nap or a hair. That it can be very difficult to actually sew, especially when you bring seams together, because it's got a slight hair on it. One of the fabrics will, so you'll start off there and you've pinned it. As soon as you put it in the sewing machine, it will slip.
Yeah.
And it's usually the top or the under one, depending on where you've put your hand pressure, they will slip. This is when basting stitching comes into,
and the walking foot.
Yeah,
the walking foot on.
Yeah, comes into its very, very own.
Yeah.
It is a very difficult fabric to work with. Once you've practiced a little bit with it, it actually isn't as daunting as it could be. I thought they were all very, very, very different, and then out of the blue, Yasmin made which can only be described in the time constraints as, no, visually, I didn't see it up close, but visually, it had elements of Ozzy Clark in there. It had, you know, sort of like Bieber-esque. It was, you know, there were lots of things, but it was old-fashioned Hollywood glamour. And she had used that tie back really cleverly, and it was adorned as a necklace.
Yes.
Rather than going, oh, I've got two I've got to do something with the tie backs. I wasn't necessarily a fan of kits, because I actually thought I saw where it was all going, but in actual fact, I didn't like it. It was a bit too rough and ready for me, that one. And also the cord that was unwound, it was so mangled at the tops. It just didn't look as if it was just like, oh, let's quickly get that, you know, up. I know they've only got 90 minutes, but when you look at what Yasmin produced, and also what Kit has produced on several other transformations, he's actually I don't know whether or not it was just pressure or it was just the fact that you've just got two curtains. I don't know.
I think Gaines and Esme and Patrick clashed on this one, I thought. They certainly disagreed. Gayna's had that lovely puff top. It was glamorous. It was gathered.
But they said it was mumsy.
But Esme said it was mumsy. Patrick liked it. And, you know, at the end of the day, what you would choose to go and pick off a rack is one thing, but I thought she did really, really well and did not deserve to come fourth. I'll be honest with you. I think it's one of the best transformations.
Well, it's those Bardo tops. I mean, look, every summer, what's on the shelves?
Exactly.
It's like a boat neck. It's always on the shelves. And sometimes, yeah, fair enough. Some people turn their nose up when the knitwear for the autumn winter has got a boat neck. And you're thinking, when you're a certain age, you do think practically. And you think, okay, if you're young and 20 and, you know, you really don't care if you catch a cold and have to be off, you know, uni for a week, then that's fine. But if you're, you know, if you've got 2 kids and a mortgage and you're trying to make ends meet, you know, it's a boat neck jump sweater that your shoulders all hanging out in the middle of winter isn't such a good idea. But it is personal. It is personal.
Of course it is.
I did not see. And also, you're being a bit picky. You've just given someone a set of curtains.
I mean,
it's not like, oh, you can choose anything from the fabric store and anything from the haberdashery. Choose a pattern at will and make something beautiful, but it's got to wow me. You've given them a set of curtains and told them to just go off and be creative with them. I think they all did a really good job.
I think they all did a really good job, but personally, I would have put Yasmin first. I think hers was outstanding, and I would have put Gayna second, because I also thought as a gown for an after dinner party, I thought it was up there. But in fact, where the order was, Ola came last because she just chopped for England, bless her, even on our second attempt. I think she just had one of those. What should have happened with Ola, if she could have done, and you can't because it's a 90-minute challenge, is she needed to go out the room, have a drink, have a deep breath, and then come back in and start at 90 minutes. Yeah, as long as it's not gin, darling. So I think that's where she just, ahead wasn't in it. The fourth was Gayna. I completely disagreed with that. And I think Patrick did as well, but Esme won on that one. Kaz got third. They said that the neck detail was very dramatic. Second was Kit, which obviously had the corset, and he attached the cord over the top, and then Yasmin first. Did you agree? I didn't agree with the judges on this one because I would have put Gayna second.
Yeah, I didn't agree with that. I definitely agreed that Yasmin should have won that one. I think, to be honest, to be fair to Ola, I think so we're coming right to the end, and you're given a load of whatever they give you on these transformation challenges, and you've got the dummy. It essentially, if you forget what you're given, because that changes each week, you have in your head a set of techniques. Like, for instance, Kit, his go-to is place the fabric on and drape it and come up with a sculptural shape. That's very clever. That will give you that will cut out a lot of time, and also it instantly shows you what the fabric, how it's going to display itself and where the fabric wants to sit. Because even though you want it to sit one way, the fabric has a mind of its own. So when you've got those go-tos, he did something completely different to what he would normally do.
Yeah, he did.
So this was mocking up a bodice. I didn't quite think the bodice and then just adding that trim on the top. It wasn't my favorite, but he did a lot of work with it.
I think they all did really, really well. Really.
But at the end of the day, I think you can get in your head, because essentially when you've got a dummy that's next to your work station, and you've got whatever it is they've got given you to do it, you in your head, you have got some go-to things, because you have to be quick at that point. You have to be creative, and you have to get something on. So if your thing is making a top and a skirt separates, then that's what we're going to see every single week. It's just a different variation in different bits and pieces.
And I think Ola's doing, she's doing really well. Let's move on to the last one, which was the made to measure. That says it all for me. They had to design a costume for a character in a horror movie. They had time to cut out the pieces before, and they also had time before to deal with the fabric, so they could have painted the fabric or created something. They had to tell a story. Whilst they had time to cut out their pieces before, they obviously just had to check that things were okay on their models. It had to fit well. They were allowed, as I say, to stress. Sorry, they may then stress, rip, or add blood to the costume. It was not to be fancy dress, and that was really clear. Not to be fancy dress. Straight away, I have to say that when it had to tell a story, and when the historian, came on, and we talked about the Bride of Frankenstein, the Bride of Frankenstein's costume is not frightening, because in fact what happened was that design was used, and people who got married, unless they wanted to frighten the bride, frighten the husband, actually they used that as a basis. So that wasn't a frightening costume. It didn't say that it had to be, to my mind, it was a design a costume for a character in the horror movie. And this is where I felt that the stories that Gaynor and Yasmin had were their backstories. So Yasmin was the Trinidad horror. It was a ladder bless, and I may have said that wrong, costume. And basically, the devil woman encouraged men to come into the woods and murder them. And then you had the Welsh, the Mary Morgan, who was eternally young and who basically drowned young men. So their backstory, their characters, had that been in a film, it would be a horror film. But their outfits were, to me, were more along the lines of the Bride of Frankenstein. So I had a big issue with this one. And also then Kit's, whilst he got joint first at the end, I thought Ola's was amazing, and she'd really thought about it. But Kit's, to me, it wasn't fitted because it was very big. That top and the trousers fitted everybody. He's distressing, and the way the Hessian had worked, and he was literally just using an awl. It was a prim awl he had, and he was really, hammering the ends to give it the distressed look. To me, his didn't fit the brief, which it didn't fit well. It was just like more fancy dress. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, but that was my overall opinion of it.
I think what they should have done, especially with something like this, they should have. So where you could get more out of the contestants, you should have had, because it's film, you could have said, so there's no confusion. What you could have said was, it's superhero week. And if you'd done superhero, then you could have had all manner of different types of costumes, or you could have said something along the lines like Disney villains.
Mm-hmm.
That has a huge scope of doing. Now, look, I've done a lot of film costume for Warner Brothers and quite a few other different studios over my well, I'm only 21, so the last few years.
When you were in
what you were laughing at?
When you were in nappies, I'm just saying, I'm agreeing with every single word, Alistair.
But for instance, the costumes that we do, and especially nowadays with HD cameras, which pick up every single detail, theatre is different.
Yeah, of course.
Theatre and stage productions are very different. So, for instance, if we want something to be really sparkly, then we can use cheaper nylon sequin fabrics, because under the lights, as long as it emulates what it's supposed to do, that's fine. However, when you're doing a film costume, those costumes cost thousands. Mind you, the stage costumes do cost thousands and thousands. But they are really, really done. I agree with you. I had a bit of an. It wasn't necessarily the contestants' fault, because
No.
you mentioned horror. I'm sorry, but you automatically think of Halloween, and it's fancy dress, and it's costume, it's trick or treating, it's all that type of thing. So I get the backstories of, you know, Gaynor and Kaz's, but the other two, both of those were borderlining for me on the fancy dress side of things, and not necessarily in terms of the, like, it would be a costume that you could literally stick on a film. Like,
but the brief was design a costume for a character in a horror movie, and
yeah,
you know, it's. I think the brief there was too wide. They needed to be more specific, because Gaynor did not want to do anything that was like frightening. She's like me. I don't like horror. I do not like horror films. But if you were to look back at horror movies, not everybody has blood and gore all over them. However, where I had the problem with, I would have given Ola and Kaz's was beautiful as well. That lovely neck corset that you had on. I know some of the sewing wasn't, you know, the collar didn't sit right, and that's when you're nitpicking. The overall impact of that red cult high priestess dress was amazing. But at Ola's, you could tell it was from a horror. It was the main character of a horror movie. Had they said the main character in a horror movie, then Ola, Kit, and Kaz would have hit the brief. But because they said design a costume for a character in a horror movie, I think Yasmin and Gaynor were knocked down because it didn't have the bloody hand mark on it, or it didn't. I mean, although Yasmin's did have a bloody hand mark on it, but it wasn't as overall as scary as the other three.
Yeah, there is a, you know, there is a fine line. For instance, when I worked on Dark Shadows, there was a cameo role for Sir Christopher. I think it was Sir Christopher Lee. I might have gotten that wrong, but I'm sure it was. But he was like an old maritime. I think I've got that wrong. But the character played an old seaman, and his costume had to look as if it was anciently old. But we actually made a beautiful, beautiful bespoke suit that the man hours just to make that bespoke suit. Then once we had completed it and fitted it, we then distressed it, and we buried it. We took cheese graters to it. We hacked leather piping around it. We used sandpaper on it to make it look like a thing. So that costume, in actual fact, it wasn't something that we just went and bought off a peg. Was made from scratch so beautifully. And then because we had it, that was the costume he was going to wear for the cameo role, because he narrates, I think he comes in and narrates at the beginning and at the very end. And that jacket, it had been buried for a week to get those soil marks in it. And yeah, so yeah, you can make a really beautiful thing and then distress it. Yeah, it was a very loose brief, and I still think, why didn't they just go for old Hollywood glamour? It was movie week. There's nothing that screams more to anybody than Hollywood glamour.
Yeah,
it was such a period of time. It was, cinema was the original TV. It was escapism. You know, my gran can remember all films were double billed, and you had different types of seats. And my gran used to take my mum to the wooden benches at the back, and my mum used to have a little quarter of bonbons, and they used, and every sit, but you were in there for a whole afternoon.
Yeah, exactly.
And you saw another one, so it was a double bill. So yeah, I wasn't. I just, yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. I think the brief was too wishy-washy, loose, and you can see because you had Gaynor and Kaz that went down one route, and you also had Orla and Kit who went down another.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't think points should have been taken off for.
No, and this is the first time I've ever seen two people win Garment of the Week. I would have just had Orla personally. As I say, I think Kit's wasn't as fitted. It didn't have as much. The work that Orla had put in was just amazing. Although Kit's looked, it ticked a horror movie, but it was the way that Hessian's brilliant. I love Hessian. You know, any Halloween costume, get the Hessian out. When I saw him with the sacks of straw, in my head I was thinking I wouldn't even go down that route. I would just use Hessian, but he did in the end. So we had a double whammy for that. And then Gaynor, who I wrote it at the beginning, was going home. It was on the cards. We've talked about it before. She's a beautiful sewer. We've had comments on the YouTube channel, basically saying, and you have to take this at point, that if everybody was fabulous, you know, we're all family fabulous, it's sewing, then it would be quite boring. You need that mix. Gain has produced some really amazing outfits. It was probably out of the ones who are left, it was the time for her to go. And I'm really excited to see what the other four do, because we are down to the nitty gritty. And next week, the semi-final is 1920s week, which will require fitting and it will require some really good sewing. So I think we're going to possibly sort the last four out. Would you agree with that, Alistair?
Yeah, I think we're going, before it's even gone to air, I think we're going to see a lot of attempts at bias cutting if they're brave enough. If I was them, I wouldn't go down that road at all. I know it's already in the can and it's already filmed. If I do it in those time constraints, I would not even attempt bias cut in any sense.
No.
Satin fabrics, I think we're going to see.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have a lot of wavy puckering seams.
And can I just say that even from the, you know, the little reel that they show you, the blooming rotary cutters are out in force again. so we'll no doubt be commenting about that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, but then, you know, what I just said about, you know, why didn't they just choose Hollywood glamour, which they have done in the past. Then obviously sometimes 1920s, if they chose Hollywood glamour for this,
it'd be too samey, wouldn't it?
It is going to be a bit too samey. I mean, look, at the end of the day, they're trying different things and they're trying new things, but I'm just not sure. I think they just need to. I don't think it was tweaked quite enough to warrant. Yeah, the output of the show just didn't really say or scream, you know, horror.
But it was movie week. It wasn't horror. It was movie week,
and but that was the genre.
Yeah. They went down that horror route. But last week you had very kindly donated 2 bundles of the vintage fabric, and our winners from that show are Jean Tillotson and Yvonne Jones 574. So if you've heard this, please email me at sales@six-penny.com and then we'll get the prizes. If you're waiting for your prizes, it is down to me. I was going to sort it all out. We're going to collate them all and get them all sent out more or less together. This week's giveaway, do you want to tell us about that one?
Okay.
Oh, should I remind you? Have you got them?
I've got it here. So I'll just open this just because, well, because it's movie week, I'm just having a few sweets. But right, so you are getting, these are 100-gram packs. Now that sounds a bit stingy, but this is Tana Lawn Liberty. 100 grams because it's such a lightweight cotton fabric. It's
lift it up a little bit so I can see.
So you're getting all of these iconic Liberty prints within these packs, and we've got 3 to give away. So these retail for about, I think they're about £20, I think, for for these. A meter
Okay.
of Liberty fabric in the store now is £29.
It's ridiculous. I made some various things, but this was one of the things because I was lucky enough to get one of your packs, and I made this little crumb quilt zipper bag, and it used a fraction of that pack, so it's a really good giveaway.
Yeah, so we've got 3 of those this week to give away. So
yeah.
there'll be 3 lucky winners, and all you have to do is you just have to simply leave a comment below. Or you don't have to write an essay. If you want to, that's fine. But you can just simply write that you've enjoyed the show. Also, you can help us out if you want to, say to a friend, come and watch with us and that kind of thing. That would be much appreciated. We are constantly Kim and I do this just out off our own back every single week, and we've critiqued it now. I think this is our 4th. Is this our oh, it's our 4th year.
Yeah.
So literally, yeah. So
yes,
we love all the comments.
We do, and I read them all, and I've got some to go back on. I'll give you that from last week's, but I'll get this out as soon as possible, and then next week we have. I'm saying next week. If you're watching it, it's going to be practically back to back. We've got Wendy Gardner joining us, and Wendy's got some fabulous insight, particularly into the earlier episodes, which is really great. So I am now going to say goodbye. I've got Donald Duck. Can you see him in the back? I've just realised he's there. Isla has been in there rejigging.
He is, and then there's I think what looks like a very couple of dolls.
Well, these are hilarious, right? So I need to show you these just very quickly. When my daughter, who is now 39, was a teenager, you used to literally open the door and she used to grunt, and I used to throw her washing in and then shut the door very quickly. And this particular day, I made this doll, right, which is Grumpy Doll. This is another version I made. And I literally just sat, I folded their arms like this and sat them outside our door, knocked on the door, and I had them on a little chair. And all she got was, and you think that's funny? So these are my Grumpy Dolls. They've got very, very long. So they're just a basic doll. I might do one of these one day. And they've got very long arms. So if you've got a teenager in your life or a budding teenager in your life, this is a really good one to get your own back, Grumpy Doll. So yes, so they sit there.
And that is quite an accurate impression. I have met, as you guys say up there, our Emma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was hilarious. So yes, so that's what these are, the Grumpy Dolls. So Isla was rearranging them. Okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you very much for joining us, and don't forget to leave those comments. And also remember that on the House of Alistair website page, if you use the code B, which is BEE 2025, nearly forgot there, you'll get a 15% discount off everything that's on the website, including sale items, because I've changed it.
I can't figure out how to. So anyway, so it's just the discount codes there, and lots of you are using it. But always make sure that you do put it in the discount code section before you check out.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, okie dokie. See you later. Bye. 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 Bye.